In 2006, when I was 18 years old, I spent the summer working as a counselor at Camp Ramah in Nyack, and I will never forget the primal scream that tore throughout the camp on August 1st, exactly 19 years ago this week, when word reached us that Michael Levin, Zichrona Livracha, had been killed while fighting in Lebanon. Although I never met Michael, he was from Philadelphia, I was from Bergen County, and he was 4 years older than I was, we could have very easily been friends. Michael fit the profile of just about every single person in my Jewish social circle. He was active in USY, he attended Camp Ramah, and following high school, he spent a year in Israel through Nativ, the conservative movement's gap year program. Michael was killed on August 1st, 2006, and I left for Israel to attend the Nativ program at the end of August that same summer. And because I followed in his path just weeks after he died, and because his life was so much like mine in so many ways, his death has always resonated with me very deeply, and I always think about him at this time of year. Michael made Aliyah in 2003, and right away, all he wanted to do was join the Israeli army. And there's a legendary story about his enlistment in the IDF. Shortly after he arrived in Israel, he went to the enlistment office to join the IDF, but he was turned away by armed guards at the door of that office because he didn't have the proper paperwork with him, and he had been waiting for months to receive that paperwork in the mail, but Israeli bureaucracy, it never came. And he was upset, but he was undeterred. After he was turned away by those guards, he walked directly to an alley next to the office building. He pushed a dumpster up against the wall. He got up on that dumpster and he climbed through a second-story window and he landed in the men's room. And then he made his way to the enlistment office and he sat down at the desk in front of the officer. And the enlistment officer said to him, "Papers, please." And Michael said, "I don't have any papers." To which the enlistment officer said, "That's impossible. You can't get through the front door of this building without papers." To which Michael said, "Well, what makes you think I came in through the front door?" And that officer sat there in stunned silence for a moment, and then he said, "I've been doing this job for 20 years, and you are the first person I've ever seen break into this building to get into the army. Let's fill out your paperwork." And despite being on the short side and weighing only 120 pounds, he successfully made it into Tzanchanim, the famous elite paratroopers unit of the IDF. Michael was killed while fighting in the war with Lebanon in the summer of 2006, and he died on the 7th of Av, and he was buried on Tisha B'Av, the traditional day of mourning on which we commemorate the destruction of both temples in Jerusalem. And he was laid to rest at Har Herzl, Israel's national military cemetery, and his parents and two sisters, including his twin sister Dara, flew in from Philadelphia to bury their son and brother. And when the family got to Har Herzl, there were hundreds and hundreds of cars in the parking lot of the cemetery. And his father's first thought was, "Oh great, there's a war going on, there must be 10 or 15 funerals today, and I'm sure nobody is here for our son." But when they walked into the cemetery, he quickly realized how wrong he was. Thousands and thousands of people were at Har Herzl that day, and every single one of them was there for Michael. He had become a national hero, a national symbol, a symbol of courage, of strength, of what it means to care about Israel and the Jewish people with every fiber of your being. But here's the hard part of the story for me, the part that I've always struggled with. Michael was at home in Philadelphia on leave from the IDF when the war broke out. He had flown home for a wedding, and he was spending the summer with his family. He did not need to be in Lebanon on that terrible day. And nobody would have blamed him if he had spent the summer at home taking a well-deserved break with his family. But when he heard that war had broken out and that his unit was going to be fighting on the front lines, he got on the first flight that he could, and he joined his unit in Lebanon, which, of course, is where he lost his life. And I really have never fully understood Michael's decision to rush back to Israel in the middle of a war. I don't think I ever fully understood it until this week when I was reading through this morning's Torah portion. In this week's double Torah portion, Matot Maseh, the Israelites are on the east bank of the Jordan River, and the tribes of Reuben and Gad approach Moses with a request. And they say to Moses, this land that we're on now, this land east of the Jordan, is excellent cattle country, and our two tribes are cattle tribes. Can't we just stay here, Moses, outside the land of Israel? We're very happy right here. And just imagine for a moment how Moses must have felt when he heard that question. Remember, he had spent 40 years dreaming of leading the Israelites into the promised land, and God had already told him that he would not be the one to lead them into the promised land. In fact, he wouldn't even be allowed to enter the promised land. He had to see it from outside the land of Israel itself. And now here come these two tribes who have the chutzpah to say to him, hey, you know what? We don't actually need to enter the land. We're good. Thanks, but we're fine out here. What Moses wants more than anything in the world, the tribes of Reuben and Gad take utterly for granted. And justifiably and understandably, Moses gets angry. He says to the Reubenites and Gadites, Ha'achichem yavo lamilchama ve'atem teshvu po. Your brothers are going to war and you're going to stay here? Where is your sense of Jewish peoplehood? And so the tribes of Reuben and Gad tell Moses that they will indeed fulfill their communal obligation. They'll fight with their brothers and help them conquer the land, and then, and only then, will they cross the river once more and settle on the east bank of the Jordan outside the land of Israel. And we read this parsha every year at this time of year, just before Tisha B'Av. And I looked it up because I was curious. And in the summer of 2006, this parasha was read on July 22nd, just a couple of days before Michael Levin flew back to Israel, and 8 days before he was killed. And I imagine that Michael Levin, who was a deeply committed Jew, was in shul with his family on that Shabbat morning of July 22nd, and that he read Moses' words, Ha'achichem yavo lamilchama ve'atem teshvu po. Your brothers are going to war, and you, Michael Levin, are staying here. And I never understood his decision to fly back to Israel in the middle of the war until it clicked with me this week. Because if Michael was in shul on that final Shabbat that he was in the United States, and he read Moses' question, how could he have not felt that Moses was speaking directly to him? And the truth is, Moses is speaking to all of us. I'm not saying that we all need to be fighting on the front lines in Gaza by any means, but Moses' words are the reason that so many Jews, including so many of us from this congregation, have flown to Israel to volunteer since October 7th. Moses' words are the reason we pray for Israel and for the hostages every Shabbat from this bima. Because when we do that, we are responding to Moses' question. And in our response to that question, we are affirming that although we may be thousands of miles away, we are and we always will be Am Echad Belev Echad, one people with one heart and one shared destiny. Shabbat Shalom and Am Yisrael Chai.